Before starting this video, I do want to give a thank you to my patrons that support the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, there are some great benefits for you in the link down below. So with that, let's get into today's video. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on Pub Stomp MTG. So with this video, I'm going to go over Lara Croft Tomb Raider. So this is a very interesting commander. Another Secret Lair Universes Beyond crossover with Tomb Raider in this instance. There's a lot of other ones that have been going on. And so this one's very interesting because it's another video game adaptation into Magic the Gathering. But before I do go any further, I do want to talk about today's sponsor. So today's sponsor is brought to you by Into the AM. This is an excellent clothing design company that focuses on graphical t-shirts like this very cool Norse mythology looking one. I was actually kind of shocked to see how much different options there were as far as graphical t-shirts. And so it's a very cool and exciting thing to talk about for me personally because I don't fit into clothes very well compared to normal people. I'm a bigger person. I was kind of skeptical at first because normally I wear an XL and usually that could vary between sizes. And so when I tried these on, I was like, okay, these are really good. These fit very well and very clean overall. And I wanted to make sure that I kind of stopped and just waited a month and just wore these throughout the month to make sure that they kind of kept their shape, because usually clothing will kind of do that to you. They'll just shrink and you kind of just get disappointed because your favorite t-shirt is now just a size too small. So far, this shirt has been doing very well with me. Honestly, this fits very well as just if I bought it just yesterday. So there is a Black Friday sale where you can get up to 80% off your orders. So make sure you use my link down below so that you can save and also get this amazing Black Friday sale. So back to Lara Croft. So this is a very cool commander. So for green, blue, and or red, we have a Teamer color combination commander, which is one of my favorite color combinations. By the way, if we're talking about 3 color combinations in general. Aside from that, this is a human ranger. I don't know if that's relevant with any different typings. I know humans are, but ranger, I'm not sure. So it does have first strike and reach. Also, whenever she does attack, you exile up to 1 target legendary artifact card or legendary land card from a graveyard and put a discovery counter on it. You may play that land from exile with a discovery counter on it this turn. And it also does have the raid ability at the end of combat on your turn. If you attack this turn, you create a treasure token. So this is a very interesting concept on a card. Honestly, there's a lot of stuff going on this just for 3 mana. You got to remember, this is a 3 mana, first strike, reach, 3/4. Again, all for 3 mana. So by that self, that's a quite insane rate. On top of that, you can make treasure with this, and you could kind of recur some lands or legendary artifacts as far as exiling them from your graveyard and kind of putting them back on the battlefield one way or another. So this is a very interesting commander. Honestly, I do like it a lot because Teamer color combinations are more known for a lot of different big, beefy creature strategies or storm strategies. So it's cool to see this in a different type of light. So with that, let's first talk about some cards you may want to add into the list. So there is a new Secret Lair coming out for the new Lara Croft cards. So there's about 1 mechanically unique card and the rest are just reskins of a different card that exists in Magic the Gathering. So for example, we do have a reskins of Search for Ascanta, Anger of the Gods, Blade of Nylea, Shadow Spear, Academy Ruins, and a treasure token. And I'm honestly kind of glad they put that treasure token in there because Lara Croft, she is making treasures off that raid ability. But aside from that, I did make a spoiler video with this, so if you do want to go check that out, I'll post the link above here. But aside from that, I do feel like these are very fitting for Lara Croft specifically. Heart of Ascanta or Search for Ascanta. Not Heart, I was reading Heart of the Explorer, then Search for Ascanta at the same time. But essentially, it kind of mills you so that you can put those legendary lands and legendary artifacts into your graveyard. Anger of the Gods is a good just wrath because, of course, Lara Croft is a 3/4 body. It's not going to kill her, but could get rid of some pesky creatures along the way. Bow and Nylea is actually really good because it has some different things that it is doing. Because Lara Croft does have first strike, it could give her death touch whenever she does attack. And this also does have some other versatility if you want to buff her up continuously for paying 2 and tapping it. But Shadow Spear is probably what's going to sell this Secret Lair. I want to say it's like a $18, $20 card. Don't quote me on that, but this is a very good card in general because you could give your creature a lifelink and also trample and +1/+1 when you equip her, and all just for equipment too. And also it does have that ability of paying colorless mana, permanents your opponent's control, gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So that's a very good option, especially if you want to just kind of buff up Lara Croft a little bit. And also Lifelink is really good at a commander game in some instances. But also with Academy Ruins, because you might be milling cards left and right, you might mill a great artifact card, or if somebody has a way to exile your graveyard by using like a Bojuka Bog, you could tap this in response so that you could just save that one artifact you really need. So I do like this Secret Lair. I wish there was a little bit more value out of it. I will say Shadow Sphere is probably carrying the weight of it. I don't think anything else is really carrying too much weight. The only thing I can think about is Search for Escanta, which is probably like a $3, $4 card? I'm not 100% sure. Also, Academy Ruins, of course, is like a $10 card, so I think it's a decent Secret Lair, of course, but Lara Croft is a mechanically unique card, so that is something you do want to watch out for. So what are some other suggestions I do have for you? So about a year and a half ago, we did have the lands from Kamigawa like Boseiju Who Endures, Otawara Soaring City, and Sokusan Crucible of Defiance. These are probably the best options for a commander because they have modal sides whether you're destroying an artifact, land, or an enchantment. With Boseiju Who Endures, Otawara can bounce something, and Sokusan can make some creatures on the battlefield, all for that channel ability. And with channel, you essentially just dump them in the graveyard, and what you can do is when you do attack with your commander, you can just exile them with the Discover counter. I mean, these are just good in general, even if you're not even playing it for that extra ability with your commander, because honestly, Boseiju is probably one of the best cards printed as far as like destroying enchantments go, at least in my opinion. There are also some pretty decent lands to buff up your commander. So for example, one that I did think about was Okina Temple of the Grandfathers. I personally like this because you can kind of use it as a combat trick, if you will, because if you swing in with your commander being a 3/4 with First Strike and Reach, then if your opponent decides to block your commander with a 4/4 body creature, you can just pay 1 mana and tapping this, giving it a +1/+1, making Lara Croft a 4/5, destroying that creature. So this does kind of feel like a gotcha card, but anyways, it's still very good, especially if you get those extra points of damage through. But the next card I do want to discuss with you, I was kind of hesitant to put it in, but I do think it's still pretty good and does have some applications with Hall of the Bandit Lord. So on surface level, it is a legendary land, and the biggest reason why I decided to kind of keep it in is because if our commander does get removed and we have to have 2 commander attacks added onto Lara Croft, we could use this to give Lara Croft haste when she enters the battlefield. So you don't really want this early on, you probably want it later on so that you can give your commander a haste option. But if you do want to give your commander pseudo vigilance, you could use a card like Minamo, School at Water's Edge. So of course this is a legendary land, and it does have that ability to pay a blue and tapping an untapped target legendary permanent. So again, this is more of like a gotcha card. So say for example, again, somebody's going to try swinging into you. If they have a 3/3 on the battlefield, you could just untap your commander so that you could block with it so that that creature dies. So again, this is just a fun little thing to consider, and honestly it's legendary, so there's not really a downside to it. But of course, I feel like this deck is going to be more focused around artifacts because I feel like there's a lot more legendary artifacts to utilize than legendary lands, so let's take advantage of that. So the first card I do want to mention is the Everflowing Well. So Lost Caverns of Ixalan, it just came out just last week with the pre-release and everything, so of course there was a lot of cool legendary artifacts to go over, especially with the Everflowing Well. So this one's very simple. It enters the battlefield, you mill 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. So this is a very simple one to use because you could of course mill 2 cards, and if you mill a legendary artifact or a legendary land, great, you're getting some value out of that because then you could exile them with Lara Croft, so then you can later on just cast them later. So I feel like this is a very good card, especially because you have that descend mechanic where if you have 8 or more permanents, you can flip this into the Myriad Pools. Plus this is pretty good because whenever you cast a permanent spell, you use mana produced by the Myriad Pool up to one other target permanent you control because of a copy of that spell until the end of turn. So the one downside though is the fact that you're probably going to be playing a lot of legendary artifacts, so this might not be a really good upside as far as the backside goes because the legendary rule apply even with your artifacts, so unfortunately one of them will be bucketed into the graveyard. But if you do have another artifact on the battlefield that's doing really good work for you, you can just copy that with one of your other ones that you just casted. So in general, I think this is a good card. I feel like the first part is probably more applicable just so that you can just milk 2 cards and draw 2 cards. That's not a bad rate for 3 mana, and it's a legendary artifact by itself. But this next one is pretty good as well, Brass's Tunnel Grinder. Honestly, this is probably one of the better cards to play because it is a legendary artifact just for 3 mana, so just by that itself, it's very good. And on top of that, when it enters the battlefield, you discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards +1. And at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a boar counter on Brass's Tunnel Grinder. So the backside is a very good card. Whenever you cast a permanent spell by using a mana produced by this card, discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. So if you casted like a 6 mana permanent spell, you could just discover 6. That seems like a really great value engine right there. So Brass's Tunnel Grinder, you could basically discard cards that you want to be putting in the graveyard, like legendary lands or legendary artifacts. So then you can just draw more cards and then utilize Lara Croft's ability later on. Honestly, very excellent choice, no question about it. Again, we are going with Ixalan because Ixalan did provide us a lot of support by putting cards into our graveyard. So we have the Great Door Matsalani. I'm not even going to try pronouncing that, but we have that ability to essentially draw a card, then discard a card. That by itself is pretty good just for 3 mana, that endless looting ability. The longer you have it on the battlefield, the more you can get value out of it, especially discarding, again, those legendary artifacts or lands. And if you wanted to, you could pay for it, tapping it to transform it. And it does transform into the core. So basically, you could add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. So obviously, we're going to be self-milling, kind of looting a lot in our deck, because of course we want to be putting a lot of different cards in our graveyard. Luckily, with artifacts and lands that we want to be putting in our graveyard, they are permanent. So the more permanents we do have in our graveyard, the more mana we can tap for with a core. So of course, we want to focus on looting a lot so that we can put cards into our graveyard, but what kind of legendary artifacts do we want to put in our graveyard? So I thought about a lot of different ones. For example, ones that do have flash speed interaction. So for example, the Mithril Coat, this does have flash and indestructible. When it enters the battlefield, attach it to a target legendary creature you control, and equipped creature has indestructible. So what I do like about this is the fact that if we do swing in with Lara Croft, we exile a card and put a discovery counter on it. Then we could use that and then cast it basically at flash speed while she's still attacking. So essentially, if you have that mana to pay it, you could easily do so with Mithril Coat. Another similar card I did want to mention is also Embercleave. This is very similar to the other one, not so much as in like it gives indestructible, but it does go in flash speed, and on top of that, when it enters the battlefield, you attach a target creature you control, and equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has double strike and trample. So again, if you are attacking with Lara Croft, this is going to cost 1 less to cast, but again, if you're exiling this with Lara Croft in the graveyard, you could just basically cast this at flash speed while she's still attacking, so you can take advantage of this too. But of course, if you do want to give all your artifacts instant speed interaction, you could use Liberator or Urza's Battlethopter. It has that important ability where you may cast a colorless spells and artifact spells as though they had flash, and also does have flash itself, so honestly, this is probably one of the better cards to play as far as instant speed interaction goes, because of course you want to do a lot of different combat tricks with Lara Croft so that you don't have her die to a bigger creature. So this is one way to do so. You can just cast a big artifact at instant speed so that you can have that instant speed interaction. So honestly, this is a very good card overall in the deck too. But I do want to talk about cards that probably will give you the most value in the long term of the game. So for example, I did think of Joyra, Weatherlight Captain, mainly because whenever you cast a historic spell, you draw cards. So any artifact, legendaries, or sagas you're casting, you're just going to be drawing cards off of them. So if you are going to be casting them from exile with Lara Croft, you're going to be drawing a card on top of that. So this is going to provide great value in the deck, just giving you so much card draw options. I did also want to mention Chimil, the Inner Sun, mainly because spells you control can't be countered. Honestly, that's a very good by itself. I know 6 mana might seem a little steep, but again, it's colorless, so you could use any mana to spend on it. And at the beginning of your end step, you could discover 5. So this is a pretty crazy effect because at the beginning of your end step, you discover 5. So you basically will cascade into something 5, or you can put it into your hand. I honestly like this card. I know 6 mana, again, might seem like a lot of mana, but I feel like it's personally worth it, especially if we're making treasure and we're ramping with lands, putting them on the battlefield. Honestly, this is a good fit. But that does also bring me to the Immortal Sun. This is also a pretty fun fit because, of course, it's very similar to Chimil in the sense where it's 6 mana and it does some crazy effects, but I feel like this is probably a little better in my opinion. We don't really worry about that other ability. Players can activate Planeswalker's loyalty abilities. I mean, if somebody has a Planeswalker commander or they have some other Planeswalker, they're kind of hosed. And at the beginning of your draw step, you draw an additional card. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and creatures you control get +1/+1. This does a lot. This gives you card draw. This makes your spells cost 1 less, and it buffs up your creatures. What more do you want from this card? This card's excellent. But if you do want a win con, Mirrodin Besiege might be a good fit for you, mainly for that Phyrexian side, because when it enters the battlefield, you choose Mirrodin or Phyrexian. Of course, in this deck, you probably want to be doing the Phyrexian side, at least in my opinion, because it has that win con staple to it. At the beginning of your end step, you draw a card that discard a card, so that by itself we want to be focusing on, because of course we want to be looting, drawing cards, discarding cards like artifacts or lands in the graveyard. And then if there are 15 or more artifact cards in your graveyard, target opponent loses the game. I feel like this is a great win con overall, because we want to be putting a lot of artifacts on our battlefield anyways, and this is one way to do so, because we'll be discarding our artifacts so that we could use Lara Croft's ability to put them back on the battlefield. So before I do end the video, I do want to discuss with you a couple cards that I feel like would be very good flavor picks, and honestly good cards in the deck anyways, so might as well include them in this video. So for the first one, Exploration, because you're exploring with Lara Croft in the video game. I haven't personally played the video game, so I don't know what it's exactly like, but I do know you're just doing a lot of exploring and looting, and so Exploration, of course, you may play additional land on each of your turns. If you already played a land on your turn, you attacked with Lara Croft, and you exiled a land, you could just play that land from exile, because you can play an additional land anyway. Even though it's really a flavor win, it's also a great card in the 99 anyways. Same can be said also for Faithless Looting, because obviously you're looting a lot in the Tomb Raider series, so this is just another card that I feel like is very good, plus you're drawing 2 cards and discarding 2 cards, and has that flashback ability to repeat the process too. So of course you want to be discarding artifacts or lands into the graveyard, and you're just going to be drawing cards off of that. So, but I do feel like one of the more fun and flavorful cards that you could be playing in this deck is Passionate Archaeologist. So obviously Lara Croft is an archaeologist that does a lot of tomb raiding, so of course this is a perfect fit because it's her background. So this does read: commander creatures you own have, whenever you cast a spell from exile, this creature deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponent. So this is very good in general, because of course it's a flavor win, and aside from that, it does have that ability because we're going to be casting artifact spells from exile with Lara Croft. This is just going to be dealing a lot of damage anyways. So those are some of the flavor wins I did want to discuss with you. Again, I don't know too much about Tomb Raider, so I don't know too much flavor aspects of it, so I'm sorry if I don't know as much as I should. I should probably play the video games probably eventually. But aside from that, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Lara Croft Tomb Raider, basically the secret lair and also a deck tech with it. Let me know down below in the comments, what did you think of this deck tech? Is there any things that you would add into this deck personally? Let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to hear some of your comments. Also, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.